Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. I wanted to jump on here and do a quick pose demonstration. One of the more common poses in yoga practice is called downward facing dog, and it is a doozy. So a lot of people don't like this pose for whatever reason. It's one of my favorites. So I just want to talk about it a little bit first before we go into how to do it. So first things first, if you are not a regular person, let me rephrase that. If you do not practice yoga regularly, this pose might be challenging, especially if you are very tight. So there's modifications for this, and I encourage you to do that until you feel comfortable, maybe trying to straighten out the legs a little bit more, or walking the feet out a little bit, or just doing different things to play around with the pose. But the first thing first is to try to find a way so that it feels good in your body. So there's a couple of different things. So one thing first, if your wrists hurt in downward dog, please understand that the only way to build strength is weight bearing. So if you do not feel very stable in downward dog because your wrists are hurting you, then maybe you just need to work up to putting weight on your hands. So if you don't normally put any weight on your hands, if you just come into a yoga class and you're doing 15, 20 downward dogs, it's going to eventually start to hurt, or at least wear on you. So the first things that you can do is, one, making sure you're in proper alignment. So making sure the shoulder is stacked up over the wrist, belly pulled in nice and tight. So I'm in a tabletop position. And you can just work on lifting the knees up. That'll help build strength so that you're more used to weight bearing. A lot of the same things that happen in downward dog happen in plank. So they're kind of interchangeable. So you can also go from plank, bringing the knees in, and then just working with that. Or like I said before, you can just work on hovering the knees over. Now the other thing with that is you don't have to have your hands like this. Okay, you can have your hands turned out a little bit. I think a lot of people get really caught up in, oh, you have to have your middle finger pointing forward. No, that's not the case. You can have your hands turned out a little bit. That actually helps externally rotate the shoulder, which might help a little bit if your shoulders are tight or your wrists start to bother you. So it's something to play around with. The other thing here, and I cannot say this enough, unless you are insanely flexible, not even just insanely flexible, insanely open, your hamstrings are open, your hips, you're very mobile, you maybe been a gymnast, a cheerleader, whatever, I want you to bend your knees every single downward dog, okay? Okay. I say that so much in class and people still don't bend their knees. So this is me telling you, bend your knees. So let's get into the actual pose itself. So you want to come into a tabletop position. We're going to curl our toes. We're going to lift the hips up, and we're going to shift the weight back. So you notice immediately I go from a square shape to a triangle shape. Watch my knees. They're going to stay bent the whole time. Hands are going to be on the mat. Lifting up, the tailbone is lifting up towards the sky. My head's going to come in between my arms. My gaze is back at my toes. My knees are bent, and I'm up on my toes. Pushing the mat away. Belly is active. And you can kind of play around with the feet. You can walk the feet out a little bit more, bend the knees even more. Now, a lot of times I see people do this. This is what it looks like. Like this. Okay? I want you to shift the weight. Shift it back. Let the head come between the hands. Knees bent. You can have your knees bent so much, okay? And if you're like me and you have a little bit extra goods, you could open up the feet so they don't have to be right next to each other. So that's downward dog facing that way. I'm going to do it facing the camera so you can see my shoulders. So I'm not shrunked up right here, okay? I've got some space in my shoulders, pushing into my hands. All right? So once more, come into tabletop, curl the toes under, lift the hips up, and then back, shifting the weight back. I'm going to bring my feet out, come up onto the tiptoes, weight back and forth. And you can kind of walk your dog out. You can swivel side to side. Now, the other thing that you'll probably be told is that, or one of the cues that you'll hear is not from tabletop, but from plank. I want to talk about that for a second. So plank pose for me looks like this, right? So downward dog would look like this. Now notice this is a very wide downward dog. So I like to kind of bring my feet in a little bit, bend my knees, and then same thing, okay? Now, it may look to you like I'm sinking into my shoulders. I have a little bit more shoulder mobility than some folks, so it might look like that. But the big thing here is you want to make sure that your legs are active. So you're really pushing into the ground. You're pushing into your hands. You're pushing your whole little hip pelvic region up and back. And then also, while you're doing all this, you're activating your core, okay? So you don't want to just do one of these numbers. I'm not doing crap right there. Literally, as soon as I got into that pose, my shoulders were like, And it's really hard to engage that way. So you really want to make sure the whole body is in the party. So my legs are active. This is what it looks like if your legs aren't active. I'm just kidding. That's not what's going to happen. But still, I really want you to make sure your legs are active, your fingers pushing into the mat, really gripping the mat, not letting them flop out on either side. And then belly pulled in nice and tight, hips going up and back, okay? Downward dog is not a resting pose. If I call it a resting pose, it's more like a pausing pose, but it's not a resting pose. You don't just rest in downward dog. Same thing with child's pose. You don't necessarily just rest in child's pose. So practice your downward dogs. You know, try to do at least 2-3 downward dogs a day. And guess what? If you can't get down on the floor, you can do a downward dog against the wall. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I just wanted to touch on downward dog because it is such a common yoga pose that is done wrong. Not necessarily wrong, but just in a way that is not as beneficial as it could be. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm here to help. And you can also send me videos or pictures if you'd like for me to look at your downward dog.